So please do not forget to tag us when you're going on social media. So I guess we would like to begin. So our next session is Rewriting Tradition, Ms. Arshia Sattar in conversation with Professor Jatindra Kumar Nayak. So let's invite them on stage with a huge round of applause. Ms. Arshia Sattar is a renowned Indian writer, translator, and scholar, widely recognized for her expertise in classical Indian literature and mythology. She's celebrated for her accessible translations of ancient Sanskrit texts, including Valmiki's Ramayana, which have been widely read and appreciated. She's also the author of words like Lost Love, Exploring Rama's Anguish and Maryada, Searching for Dharma in the Ramayana, which offer in-depth analysis of classical Indian narratives. In addition to her literary achievements, she has taught classical Indian literature and co-founded the Sangam House Writers Residency in 2008. Her contribution to children's literature were recognized in 2022 when her Mahabharat for Children won the Sahitya Akademi Prize for Children's Literature. And of course, Professor Jatindra Nayak, a distinguished Indian translator, literary critic, and academic known for his contribution to Oriya literature and print culture, also the chairman of Shiksha Sandhan, an organization focused on Oriya literature and history preservation. And like Shri Ashok had said in the morning, a friend, philosopher, and guide to the KLF family. So I'll request Professor Nayak to take the session forward. And ma'am, if I may compliment, you have the most glorious and brightest smile that I have seen today since morning.
May I say the same to you?
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, it's a great pleasure to welcome a dear old friend, Arshia Sattar, to Odisha. I think I can take credit for introducing Odisha to Arshia Sattar. I think although she claims she had visited Odisha in her childhood, I think as an adult, she came to Odisha because I persuaded her to come. So in 2013, she gave the second Chittaranjan Das Memorial Lecture. So as I said earlier, it's great to meet an old friend. And today we will be talking about rewriting tradition and her achievement as a translator. Before that, let me just say that for last so many years, I have been using a statement she made without her taking her name, because I always believe that originality lies in forgetting the author's name. So once, long back, we had interviewed her in a magazine which I edit, and there I had asked her, people talk about translation as discovery. What do we mean by that? And then there she had said that, well, when you translate a text, you discover that text. So that was a very insightful statement. So after 12 years of plagiarizing her, let me admit that the statement belongs to Arshia Sattar, not to me. So I should pay her royalty. So I should begin by asking her, because she's an eminent translator of Ramayana and Katha Sarit Sagar and many. I think you have now begun writing for children? Yes, or you always did that? No, I think you began writing for children recently. Okay. So she has been translating all these famous classical texts, Sanskrit texts into English, and a very famous translator. I think after A.K. Ramanujan, Vikram Das, I think she is perhaps the most important translator of the country. And no wonder she was mentored by Wendy Doniger and A.K. Ramanujan at the University of Chicago. She, I think, inherits a very rich legacy. So what did you discover? Now you have translated Ramayana, you have translated Katha Sarit Sagar. These are ancient texts, multi-layered and rich in significance. And so what did you discover there in these texts, if you talk about translation as discovery? And then we'll talk about other things.
Thank you, Jatindra, that very, very, very generous introduction. When I was invited here, I said, okay, Jatin has something to do with this. But my great pleasure was to know that I'd be talking to him this afternoon, because it's very easy to talk to friends. Also, when your friend happens to be one of the jewels in the crown of Indian translation, a terribly, terribly modest man who, claims that if at all he has any influence, it's restricted to Uriya, but it's not at all. Jatin Nayak is truly one of the great contemporary Indian translators and needs to be acknowledged as such. So, what do I discover when I translate? One of the things I discover is that it doesn't matter whether you're translating Ramayana, which is from 2,500 years ago, or you are reading like Han Kang, who writes in Korean in our time. What I discover most of all is that we are so alike. Yeah, human beings are human beings. Literature is about human beings. Literature is about the human conditions. So when we read Ramayana, we can be alienated by the fact that, Dasharatha is 60,000 years old and Duryodhana has hundreds and thousands of elephants, and Yudhishthira has caskets of gold and carried by 100,000 male slaves. And we can choose to be alienated by that. But what we can also see, if we want to, is what it means when you have to make terrible decisions, when you have to make choices, not always between what is right and what is wrong, but oftentimes between what is right and what is right. Yeah, who is Rama going to, I don't want to use the word obey, but who is Rama going to be responsible to? Is he going to be responsible to his father, who says, you have to go and live in the forest for 14 years? Is he going to be responsible to his young wife, who says, what do you mean you're going to the forest without me? When Rama goes to tell Kaushalya that I've just been sent to the forest for 14 years and I'm going to go, and she said, why? So he says, because I have to do my dharma towards my father. And she said, what about your dharma towards your mother? Yeah. So every time we acknowledge one of our obligations, anytime we acknowledge one of our responsibilities, we are automatically violating another one. Yeah, and that's as true 2,500 years ago as it is today. So that, after 40 years of being with the text, this is what I have discovered.
If I remember right, the title of the lecture you delivered here 10, 12 years ago was that where monkeys speak Sanskrit. Okay, that was. And I think in that lecture, you presented Ramayana as a love story. That it's actually not an epic about war. It's about love and how that love story turns sour. And how at the end of the narrative, Rama ceases to be a lover and becomes a warrior, almost a heartless warrior. So I think you should share these very fascinating thoughts about the Ramayana with our audience here, because that's not how we generally look at Ramayana. We think of it as a war between good and evil, between Rama and Ravana, where betrayal, Vibhisana's betrayal. So I think that's how we have many Ramayanas. So that's your Ramayana. So let's hear about that.
Well, one of the reasons I think that we think of Ramayana as fundamentally a book about war is that one thing, we've been told that, it is about the victory of good over evil. It is about the death of Ravana. We also read Ramayana very much in the shadow of the Mahabharata. Yeah, the Mahabharata is clearly about war. There's nothing else happening in the Mahabharata except the preparation for war, the war, and the aftermath of war, right? Well, there's a lot of other stuff happening, but it's not happening to the main characters in the Mahabharata. But when you read Ramayana, any Ramayana, in whatever language is close to you, or even when you watch Ramayana on television, or you now read Ramayana in comic books or in graphic novels, the war doesn't seem to be about people being killed. so much as it seems to be about like magical weapons. And the people who are being killed are not human beings like you and me. They're Rakshasas, they're monkeys, they're bears, they're Falana, they're Dhamka, and all that. In Mahabharata, the war is really about people like you and me. People are dying. You are seeing their pain. You are hearing them screaming. You see the blood, the gore, the battlefield becoming muddy, not with water, but with blood. You see the vultures. It's very, very real. And Ramayana war is like, then this arrow went, it had broke into 1,000 snakes, but from that side Indrajit put his arrow, which went into 2,000 snakes and all that, right? So in a sense, the war is the least important part of the Ramayana. The most important part of the Ramayana, in my humble opinion, is the abduction of Sita and her time in captivity, and Rama's grief, which drives him mad, literally, at the thought that he may never see his wife again. And so there is a war so that he can get her back. But there are many things that happen to Rama between the time he leaves his father's palace and his own return to that palace in triumph. So he's very shaken that this has happened to him, which Valmiki says quite clearly, that when Rama leaves Kaikeyi's chambers and he's going to visit his mother, his face is drawn and pale. It's not like, oh, okay, I have to obey my father, let me go to the forest. Not at all. He's quite shocked by what has happened to him. And there are 2 or 3 very explicit occasions in Valmiki Ramayana where Rama is very critical of Kshatriya Dharma because it leads to violence, and because he tells Lakshmana, it encourages the base in a human being. So anyway, when he goes to the forest, his early part of his time in the forest, spent with sages in conversation. He goes to Bharadwaja, he goes to various other sages who are Vanaprasthis. They are people who live in the forest. And he engages, one imagines, in philosophical discussions with them. And one day, Sita says to him, she says, put your weapons down. There's no need for you to carry your weapons here. You can be a Kshatriya. You can return to being a Kshatriya when we go back to Ayodhya. And she says, when a Kshatriya carries his weapons, violence is drawn to him. And I'm afraid that this is what will happen to you. And Rama very sweetly says, thank you, darling, but you're just a woman. What do you know? Immediately after that is the episode with Shurpanakha, which is followed by the magical deer, by the golden deer, and violence just begins to escalate in the text. So my argument in that book is that Rama had actually got used to living in the forest, that he had seen that it's possible to be another way. You don't have to be a warrior. You can live more peaceably. And so he gets used to this idea, and then the most horrible thing happens, which is his wife is taken away from him. And he realizes that in order to get her back, he's going to have to become a warrior again. And not only is he going to have to become a warrior, but he's going to have to steel his heart against the woman that he has loved the best, the only woman he has ever loved. Because he knows also that once she has been taken away from him, he can never take her back. Not because he doesn't love her, but because other people will say, as they did, oh my God, look, he's taken his wife back. She lived in the house of another man. You know what? Rama is just like his father. His weakness for a woman makes him overlook his Raja Dharma, how he should behave as a king. So that becomes Rama's tragedy, that he cannot take Sita back even though he loves her, and that in order to get to the point where he can even say, I can't take you back, he has to become a Kshatriya. So this man who wanted a more peaceable life, who really, like Yudhishthira, also Yudhishthira is a reluctant king. We know that. Gautama Buddha left the palace. Mahavira was also from the Kshatriya class, right? So in that period of 500 BC, when historical Buddha and historical Mahavira were alive, the Upanishads were being written, there was a very, very clear and possible ideal of a Kshatriya giving up the dharma of a warrior and considering the dharma of a more peaceful life.
You are making my task easier by talking, and so that I don't have to do any talking. So that's a truly insightful perspective on the Ramayana. I had never thought about looking at the epic from that angle. So I immensely benefit from that. So we are all aware of Paula Richman's many Ramayana. And there are 300 Ramayans written in different Indian languages, and they all retell the story innovatively. And I'll remind you of, maybe you have heard this from your great teacher once, A.K. Ramanujan was giving us a lecture on the Ramayana, many Ramayanas, and there he said that in some language, Rama is going to the forest and Sita is pleading to join him. And then when she goes on and on requesting him to take her, then Rama says, no, I can't take you with me to the forest, which is a dangerous place for a woman. Then Sita says, already hundreds of Ramayanas have been written, in which Ramayana Sita doesn't accompany you. And then Rama relents and takes her to the forest. So, since you are not, you have confined yourself largely to the Sanskrit text, have you ever felt tempted to, say, translate any, say, in Kannada or Ramayana written in other languages, or you think you're happily
I'm very
confined
happy.
yourself to
Very, very happy.
the elevated world of Sanskrit?
No, for many reasons. I think one is it's the oldest text we have, and it's the text that most of us know the least. We tend to know the Ramayana that is closest to us linguistically, culturally, and Valmiki so long ago, oh my God, it's poetry, oh my God, it's Sanskrit, oh my God, it's so difficult. It is all of those things. But it is the one that we know the least. But what I think is exciting for me, because I am not any kind of religious person, Valmiki is the only text. There are two very important things about Valmiki. One is that Sita has a voice. And the second one is that it is unclear whether Rama is God or not. And even Rama is unclear. He doesn't know who he is. So I find it a very open text, because, once God enters a story, there are no questions. Whatever God does is right. You may not understand why he's doing it, and it's always he, God. You may not understand why God is doing what he's doing, but you know that it's for the right thing. So Krishna can do whatever he likes, right? We have no moral judgment. We have no question. We have no... we cannot interrogate the text. We cannot interrogate God. But because Valmiki is very open about this, because of course, the place where Rama is God in Valmiki is in Bala Kanda and in Uttarakanda, which were composed much later. So the central books of the text are really, you can ask Rama questions. You can say, why did you do this? What were you thinking? But Krishna will tell you, I was thinking what I was thinking. That's the end of that story.
While I was listening to you, I was reminded of a legendary Tamil professor who taught at Ravenshaw College long back, in 1938. He translated Kamban's Ramayana into English. P.S. Sundaram, professor. In fact, Professor K. Sridhar is his nephew, who engaged someone in a conversation today. So he has translated Kamban's Ramayana too. And in the introductions, he says that in Valmiki's Ramayana, I haven't read Valmiki's Ramayana, so I'm quoting him. If I misquote him, it's... there he's a human being, largely a human being. Then a process of deification begins. And in Kamban's Ramayana, we are halfway through. And in Tulsi Ramayana, Rama is a god and nothing else. So would you reflect on this? And because you are the expert. You are the expert.
I know something. I can say I know something about Valmiki Ramayana. So the thing is, we forget that religions grow and develop and change in history, right? All religions claim to be born in some kind of ahistorical moment, but they grow in history. So as bhakti was becoming the central theological relationship within Hinduism, so Hindu gods also changed. That I think is one very important reason for Rama's increasing deification over, because between Valmiki Ramayana and Tulsidas, it's like 1500 years, if not longer. So Hinduism has had a lot of time to think about itself, to reform itself, to engage itself, to think about the kind of gods that it wants to have. And I think it's also wonderful that Ramayana is the text that reflects that. Ramayana is a very generous, very giving text. It is constantly responding to its environment, which is why now, since the 1980s, we can have yet another revisioning of Rama. With the political agenda driving that. And I don't think there's any other text that I can think of in history that is so or in the world that is so responsive to its own moment. And so the growth of Rama's deification is also the growth of Hinduism as a profoundly devotional religion.
I think you also made a very insightful comment without perhaps being aware of it. You're talking off the cuff and all that. But I noticed that you made a very interesting contrast, suggested a very interesting contrast between Mahabharata and Ramayana and the way war has been visualized and conceptualized. So could you please elaborate on that a little more? Because I found that very fascinating, that the war in Ramayana is qualitatively different from the war that's presented in the Mahabharata. And why Devadatta Patnaik yesterday suggested that that's the reason, not for the war. For some reasons, Mahabharata is not recited at home, but Ramayana is. So what are the essential differences, particularly this war, the different ways in which the war is represented in these two epics? I think you should talk about that.
Yeah. So there's, the epics. Many countries in the world, the whole Indo-European crescent, as it were, the semicircle that constitutes hypothetical Indo-Europeanism, all of these cultures have epics. They all tell their stories in the same way, which is basically the establishment of the warrior class as the elite. All epics are really stories of the conflict between Brahmins and Kshatriyas, right? Because the Vedic period and the Upanishadic period and all the Brahmins are supreme. They are telling you what to do. And then suddenly the Kshatriyas are like, hello, we are keeping you in power, maybe we should get a little more attention. So everything changes in that regard. But here we have it. So epics were written by, we are told, by suttas, by bards. Whoever it was that wrote the Mahabharata, Vyasa, allegedly, is clearly somebody who has seen a war. Also, you care so terribly about people in the Mahabharata. The death of Abhimanyu, I don't care who you are. Everybody has cried at the moment when Abhimanyu is killed inside the Chakravyuha. Yeah, for me, in Peter Brook's Mahabharata, the death of Karna is unbearable. Yeah, I literally have to close my eyes because I cannot see. Why do we care so much? Because we know these people, we know their histories, we know their mummies, we know their daddies, we know their sisters. Yeah, and we have heard their backstory. In Ramayana, who are these Rakshasas? Vidyut Jiva, somebody else, Akampana, somebody else. These are Rakshasas with the names. We have no connection with them. We don't care when they die. So war is meaningful. And this is really a conversation very suited to March 2025, that war, what we have to learn is to care about wars that don't involve us. We don't have to know somebody in Gaza to care. that there is a war there, and it is an unacceptable war. Yeah. So that is the difference, I think, between Ramayana and Mahabharata. The difference in the war is that the reader, the listener, the reteller is, we participate, yeah, and we take sides. Yeah. So whatever we think about, like how good the Pandavas are or how bad the Kauravas are, it doesn't matter whose side Karna is fighting on. When Karna is killed by his own brother, by the horrible, horrible boons and curses that he has collected through his life, all of those come together. It's that perfect storm, as we say now, yeah? The perfect storm of Karna's curses come together in the moment of his death. And then, of course, the horrible thing, when the women are walking through the battlefield looking for their men who have been killed, and the only thing they want is to be, when they find the body of their loved person, that person should not have been shot in the back, because that would have meant that he was running away. And Kunti comes across the body of her first son, the son that she could never acknowledge, and she's weeping, and her other sons, why her other sons say to her, this guy is our enemy, why are you crying for him? And she has to tell them why she's crying for him.
I think when you were talking, I thought to myself that you're actually an interlocutor's nightmare. Because when I was listening to you, I forgot what questions I'll ask you. So I decided I'll ask you this question, but it's so fascinating I forgot. So,
sorry, I talked too much.
No. I just got carried away and forgot the question I wanted to ask you. So I told you, you are an interlocutor's nightmare. No one should interview you. You should go on talking and talking. So the next question, before I move from Arshia Sattar, the scholar, to Arshia Sattar, the translator, both are great. So I would ask you one last question relating to Ramayana and Mahabharata and epics in general. That is, when we talk about the Iliad and the Odyssey, or Aeneid, they have already receded into the dusty shelves of libraries, or even more dreary world of school syllabus or college syllabus, or the classics program of Oxford and Cambridge. They are no longer part of everyday life anymore. They are become, what should I say, dead in the true sense of the term. But how come these two epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, have continued to remain alive in many subtle and not so subtle ways, and continue to challenge our imagination, stimulate our thoughts, and make us think, connect them to the crisis that we face in real, that they continue to remain vibrant reference points. So could you talk about that for a bit?
Well, I think the fact that the Iliad and the Odyssey remain dead, as you say, or they've become sort of fossilized in universities' syllabi, classroom syllabi, maybe that's a problem with Western civilization, that they're not looking. I don't mean that we should look at the past, that's really not what I'm trying to say. But what you can think about is how we've made the same mistakes over and over and over again. Yeah, I think if Western civilization looked back at its own classics, they might have a little more compassion and empathy. What is our problem is completely, I think, different. I think one of the reasons we keep telling, certainly Ramayana and maybe Mahabharata over and over again, because we haven't quite figured it out. Something about those texts continues to make us uncomfortable. So that's why we have so many Ramayanas. Everybody is trying to tell the Ramayana in which they are, in which they understand. Where they can see themselves, right? So we have women's Ramayanas, we have Dalit Ramayanas, we have Gond Ramayanas, we have Musalman Ramayanas, yeah? Because everybody is saying, no, I want to understand this. And and it's great, I think, if the central mystique of the Ramayana is never figured out, we will keep telling the story, and I will be extremely happy because I think it's a great story.
Now, one last question to Arshia Sattar, the iconic translator. Generally, whenever we talk to politicians, or whenever someone defines politics, they say that it's the art of the possible. Politics is the art of the possible. So would you describe translation as the art of the possible? Because translators are seen as failed writers. Like there are many writers here and we are failed writers. Okay, we translate because we can't write. Of course, you write novels. And, no. So what is it? I mean, what sustains a translator? Is this idea that translation is the art of the possible, that we're constantly pressing against the limits of the possible?
I think, I think what sustains a translator is what you started this conversation with, which is a sense of discovery. But I think translators are like fabulously generous people because we do all the hard work so that all these people can read in English or whatever is the language in which they're most comfortable, right? You and I suffer. We carry dictionaries, big fat dictionaries. We, when oh, they're creative. I forgot that. Yes. No, I honestly think that the translator's quest is finding what is universal for human beings. That people love their children. I mean, people argue with their wives. People get old and forget that their time has passed. Those are all very, very human things. So I do think that a translator's quest is a sort of, it's a humanitarian gesture that we learn to see ourselves in other languages, in other times, and in other places.
We have been reminded that only 7 minutes are left. So we can take a few questions from the audience. I think that would. But I have learned enough so that I can pass them as my ideas for another 5 years. Next time when we meet, I said that I have stolen your ideas, but didn't mention the source.
For you, copyright free. Yeah.
Any questions? Yeah, please. Where are the microphones?
So one thing it struck me listening to you that there's a kind of a endless struggle in the epics between the need to be human and the need to be divine, and
that is only one man's struggle. It is not ours. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, like I'm thinking of the Hellenic epics too. They're kind of perpetually drawn to mortals because mortal flesh is perishable, and that's why they're trying to sleep with mortals because there's something about divine flesh which is not. And I feel that what you're saying earlier about even between the Ramayana and the Mahabharata about the nature of war, that this is kind of an unresolved tension in the polytheistic epics. I think this is where the Abrahamic religions are very different. The Abrahamic religions are in some ways much more austere and non-representational, but the polytheistic epics, because they seem so human, and at the same time they have this divine urge and this relationship between humanity and divinity, humanity and not maybe divinity, but transcendence is never resolved. And it's there in Karna, it's there in all the characters, it's there in Zeus. And I was wondering, what do you make of this tension? Is it meant to be resolved or is it just there?
I don't think there is any monotheistic epic. Yeah. I think epics come out of a historical moment and a set of cultures which are fundamentally polytheistic, right? So I think that apart from Rama, the tension that us regular mortals face is really the tension between free will and destiny. That this is what I want to be, this is what I want to do, but there seem to be forces that work against me. Ramanujan used to tell us that there are 4 drivers in the epics. There is karma, dharma, there are boons, and there are curses. And then there is vidhi, right? So I think I think human beings, when they're unable to be their better selves or to fulfill the so-called sattvic aspects, they say, oh my God, it's destiny. right? So the failure remains ours, but we impute something else as the cause of it, right? So I don't think it's got to do with human and divine. There's only one person who has that problem. The rest of us have to just learn to take responsibility for what we've done, and like very, very good Hindus, face the consequences of our actions. That is what Bhagavad Gita tells us to do, which is the most difficult thing in the world. Yeah, to say, I have done this and I'm ready for what it entails. None of us are ready for what it entails. Oh, this happened, oh, that happened, oh, the bus was late, oh, I fell down. 100 reasons to not fulfill your promises, to not fully acknowledge responsibility, to accountability, all of this. But that is the tension, to always blame something bigger than yourself.
Hello, ma'am.
Good afternoon. My name is Devashish. When you're doing translations of people who are still living, and when it's how often do you have to go back to the author when you have to
I
get the
don't
feel?
do living
You
people's
don't living-
translations.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I
then-
revel in the freedom of long
Fantastic,
dead,
fantastic.
imaginary people, even
But-
mythical
okay,
beings.
Okay, but
I
in case you
always
have
say
to do that, will you have to go back to the author often? Okay.
I always say that the best writer is a dead writer who has died 70 years ago, from the point of view of a translator. And any more questions?
Yes,
Please.
hello, sir. This side. Yes. Ma'am, so one of the most fascinating statements given by you was that Sita has a voice. And you must have observed a lot of modern retellings, like Sarah Joseph's retellings. They are constantly trying to prove otherwise, that Sita has always been like a subservient voice, and which needs to be countered, and she needs to have, she needs to be more she was passive, and she needed to be otherwise.
You should notice who's doing those retellings. It's all men. Yeah. If you read Chitra Banerjee, Diva Karuni, her Draupadi is super feisty. Yeah, you read her Sita. Sita's always asking questions. You know, men, the patriarchy has told us that, oh, you must be like Sita. I say, yes, please be like Sita. Not because the patriarchy finds us submissive, but because feminism finds her with agency and with spirit and with energy. Yeah. So do not be fooled by this patriarchal Sita.
What do you feel about Valmiki's depiction in particular?
I think it's fantastic. The first time you meet Sita in Valmiki, she is saying to Rama, what do you mean I can't come to the forest? The last time you see Sita in Valmiki Ramayana, she's saying, I cannot be here anymore. I have to leave. That's quite a narrative arc. It is not the arc that the patriarchy wants you to see. Just remember that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, I will just end by saying that writers are divine and translators are human. Writers are monkey-faced gods and translators are god-faced monkeys. At least to have a good face. Thank you very much.
Well, very interesting session. In fact, I'll request Jatindra ji only to do the honors and felicitate and Arshia ji. So can we have a, yes, I'll request. Okay, all right. It'll be a pleasure, my pleasure in fact. Yes, this is really very, truly honored. Thank you so much. Amara परिवर्तन अभिवेचन पे मु वर्तमान अनुरोध करिवि सुजुक्त वेद प्रकाश नायक को मंच को आसीबा पे. Our next session is Odia Galpa Kathana Kara. So for that I'll request Ved Prakash Nayak to please come on stage, do the honors, introduce